Imagine this every time you make a choice that pulls you away from the light, from the divine guidance of spirit. There's a ripple in the universe. What if I told you that when we sin, God feels it deeply, not in anger, not in condemnation, but in a way that only a creator could? It's like a parent watching their beloved child walk into danger. Stay with me here, because this isn't about guilt, this is about understanding the profound depths of God's love for you. What I'm about to share will change the way you see your relationship with Him and how you move forward in your spiritual journey. As you listen, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Cosmic Harmony, and leave a comment with 77 to signal the universe that you're ready for transformation. Play this on repeat to absorb every ounce of energy and truth being shared here. Chapter 1: God's Heart. When we fall, when we sin, it's natural to picture God as a stern judge, ready to hand down punishment. But that image doesn't reflect His true nature. The reality is so much deeper, more loving, and more profound than we often imagine. God's heart doesn't harden when we stray, it aches. He doesn't experience anger the way we humans understand it. Instead, His sorrow comes from knowing the weight of the consequences we face when we step out of alignment with His divine plan. Imagine God as a parent watching their child wander into danger. The parent doesn't react with anger, they ache. They long to protect, to guide, to bring the child back to safety. This is how God feels when we stray. Sin isn't just about breaking rules, it's about severing the connection between us and the flow of divine love, guidance, and purpose that God has woven into our lives. When we turn away, we create a gap, a distance in that connection, and God feels that separation not because He is powerless, but because His love for us is infinite. He understands the cost of our choices, even when we don't. And yet, His response isn't condemnation. It's a desperate longing to bring us back into His embrace. Think about the parable of the lost sheep. The shepherd leaves the 99 to find the one that has wandered away. That's God's heart for you. When you sin, He doesn't abandon you, He goes searching, calling out to your spirit, reminding you of your worth and your place in His kingdom. God's love isn't transactional, it's unconditional. It doesn't fluctuate based on your actions. In fact, His love intensifies in the moments you feel furthest from Him because He knows you're worth fighting for. His love is persistent, personal. He doesn't see humanity as just a whole, He sees you, your every thought, every action, and every struggle. You matter to Him more than you can possibly imagine. When you fall, He doesn't see a failure, He sees a soul worth redeeming, a life worth restoring. Let's make this personal. Reflect for a moment on a time in your life when you felt lost. Maybe your choices or circumstances created a distance between you and God. Close your eyes and picture that moment. Now, imagine God standing right beside you, not with arms crossed in judgment, but with arms open, ready to pull you back in. He's not shouting accusations. He's whispering words of love, calling you back to Him. How does it feel to know that, even in your lowest moments, God has never given up on you? You are always worth His pursuit, always worthy of His embrace. In your darkest hour, He sees your potential, He sees your worth, and He never stops loving you. Here's a practical exercise to deepen this understanding. Take a few moments each day to reflect on God's unyielding love. Even in your struggles and mistakes, remind yourself that He is right there, not judging you, but calling you back, ready to hold you close. Let this truth sink in. God's love for you is not based on your perfection, but on your worth as His beloved child. Are you ready to embrace this divine love and live your life from a place of unconditional grace and healing? Let this be the foundation of your transformation. Take a moment to reflect quietly and grab a journal. Write a letter to God, expressing a time when you felt distant from Him. Be raw and honest about your emotions, whether it's guilt, shame, confusion, or even frustration. Let it all pour out onto the page. Then, imagine what God's response might be, speaking directly to you. What would He say? Picture His voice gentle, loving, and filled with understanding. He's not condemning you for your mistakes, but instead reminding you that His grace is greater than any error you've made. His love is unwavering, even when you feel far from Him. In fact, His love is always close, watching every step you take, and even when you wander, He's gently guiding you back. God's love for you isn't based on your performance, it's unconditional. It's the type of love that sees your potential even when all you can see are your flaws. It's the love that waits patiently, no matter how long it takes for you to return to Him. When we fall, it's not the end of our journey, it's simply a detour. And every detour holds the potential for redemption. God doesn't just want you to come back, He wants to walk with you through the process of restoration. No matter how small your step toward Him may be, He sees it and celebrates it. Heaven rejoices when even one soul turns back, and that includes you. Think of the story of the prodigal son. The son expected judgment and rejection, but what did he receive instead? His father ran to him, embraced him, and celebrated his return. This is a perfect picture of God's heart towards you. He doesn't want to keep track of your flaws or count your mistakes. Instead, His desire is to heal the wounds caused by sin, to guide you back into alignment with His divine plan, and to remind you of the incredible purpose He has set for your life. This isn't about earning God's love. It's about realizing that His love has always been there, waiting for you to come home. When we fall, God doesn't focus on the fall itself, He focuses on how He can lift us back up. He sees the lessons we can learn, the strength we can gain, and the faith we can build through the process of restoration. His grace transforms our failures into stepping stones that lead us closer to Him. His love is your constant, unshakable foundation, always present, always forgiving, and always ready to welcome you back into His embrace. Take this truth with you: God's heart when you fall is not filled with anger or disappointment. Instead, it is filled with love, longing, and an unrelenting desire to see you restored. The moment you take a step back toward Him, you'll find that He's already been running toward you, arms wide open, ready to welcome you home. Trust in this love, chosen one, and know that no matter how far you wander, God's heart will always be waiting for you. Chapter 2: The Weight of Sin and God's Patience. When we think of sin, it's easy to focus on the guilt and shame it brings. But Spirit wants you to see a different perspective, the way sin impacts God's heart, and the incredible patience He shows in the face of it. Sin creates a barrier between you and God, a distance He never intended for you to experience. He feels the burden it places on your soul, and He knows how it dims your inner light. Yet, even in the midst of your struggles, God waits for you. His patience is unwavering. Imagine for a moment what it must feel like for God to watch His creation full of potential stumble into choices that harm their spirit. It's not anger that fills Him, it's sorrow and compassion. He knows what you're capable of, the destiny He's placed within you, and how sin tries to pull you away from it. But instead of condemning you, God waits. He waits for the moment your heart turns back to Him. And when it does, He's ready to embrace you without hesitation. In a world that demands quick fixes and immediate results, God's approach is refreshingly different. His patience isn't born out of obligation, it's born of love. The love that sees the bigger picture, the love that believes in you, even when you may have lost faith in yourself. It's a patience that transcends time and circumstance, and it's available to you always. For me, this speaks volumes about God's nature. We live in a fast-paced world where everything is instant, and the pressure to succeed quickly often overwhelms us. But God's patience invites us to slow down, to embrace the process of growth and healing. It teaches us that there is beauty in the journey, not just the destination. His patience isn't about rushing you, it's about giving you space to learn, to grow, and to rediscover your connection with Him. That's a love that changes everything. God sees you as a masterpiece in progress, not a finished product. Each detour you take, every stumble you experience, and even the moments when you stray from His guidance are met with His steadfast commitment to you. He understands that the road to transformation is not always linear, and He walks beside you every step of the way. The truth is, God doesn't expect perfection, but He has an unwavering belief in your ability to grow and evolve. Here's an exercise for you to reflect deeply on this truth. Close your eyes and picture God sitting beside you silently as you wrestle with your choices. Visualize His face, not one of judgment or disappointment, but one filled with deep love and understanding. Imagine the warmth in His eyes, the gentle reassurance in His presence. How does it feel to know that even when you're not at your best, He's still there patiently waiting for you to reach out to Him? His patience isn't passive, it's active and alive. Every time you feel a nudge to turn away from sin, or when your conscience whispers a better path, that's God speaking directly to you. He's working within you, guiding you gently back to His truth. God doesn't rush you or force you, He lovingly invites you back, showing you that His love isn't conditional upon your perfection, but rooted in His unchanging eternal nature. Think for a moment about the countless ways His patience has manifested in your life. Perhaps there were times when you stood at the crossroads of a decision you knew wasn't right, but someone intervened, steering you toward a better choice. That was God's hand. Or in moments when you felt overwhelmed by shame, yet somehow a glimmer of hope kept you from giving up. That too was God's Spirit reminding you of your worth. His patience is not passive, it's actively working behind the scenes, orchestrating opportunities for you to return to Him. This is the beauty of God's patience. It doesn't merely wait, but works, even when you feel the furthest from Him. His Spirit is still stirring within you, gently whispering who you are and whose you are. Sin may try to convince you that you're unworthy, that you've strayed too far, but God's patience proves otherwise. It shows that He sees beyond your mistakes and into the person He created you to be. Reflect on this truth. God's patience is not a sign of weakness or tolerance of sin. Rather, it's a powerful reflection of His eternal love and His belief in your ability to overcome. God doesn't want you to stay in a place of guilt or regret. He desires for you to rise, to learn, and to take steps closer toward the purpose He has set for your life. His patience is a constant reminder that no matter how far you've wandered, you're never too far to return. God's patience isn't a sign of indifference, it's a testament to His love. He waits for you because He knows your worth, and He will never stop calling you back into His embrace.
Sin may create distance, but it can never diminish the depth of His love for you. He is the Father waiting with open arms, the shepherd searching for the lost sheep, and the Creator who knows the beauty within you, even when you can't see it yourself. So, chosen one, let this chapter remind you, no matter where you are on your journey, God's patience is your constant companion. It is a reflection of His unwavering commitment to you and His belief in the greatness He has placed within you. Trust in His patience. Let it draw you closer, and know that His love will always be greater than any mistake you've made.
Chapter 3: The Grace That Covers Your Flaws. When we fall into sin, it's easy for the enemy to whisper lies into our minds. You've gone too far, he says. You've messed up too much. These lies only deepen our feelings of guilt and shame, convincing us that we are beyond redemption. But let's challenge this perspective. Yes, sin may create a temporary separation between us and God, but it can never erase the truth of who we are in His eyes. The grace of God covers our flaws, our mistakes, and even our darkest moments. This grace isn't about ignoring our sins or pretending they don't matter. It's about acknowledging our shortcomings and choosing to receive God's mercy and forgiveness. God's grace doesn't just wipe the slate clean, it empowers us to rise again, to learn from our missteps, and to move forward with the assurance that we are still loved, still cherished, and still worthy of His presence. In my own journey, I found that the moments when I felt most unworthy of God's love were often the moments when His grace shone the brightest. It wasn't a grace that condoned my mistakes, but one that gently pulled me out of the darkness and into His light. It's this grace that gives us the strength to keep going, even when we feel like we've failed. When we stumble, it's not the end of the road, it's simply a chance to experience God's grace anew, to rise again with renewed strength. Take a moment and reflect on the times in your life when you felt like you had fallen too far. How did God's grace show up in those moments? Maybe it was through the kindness of a friend, a timely word of encouragement, or simply a moment of peace amidst the chaos. Those are all signs of God's grace at work in your life. His grace covers you, protects you, and heals you no matter what you've done or where you've been. Trust in this grace, chosen one. It's not just a one-time gift, it's an ongoing reality that is available to you at all times. It's the grace that enables you to stand up after every fall, the grace that fills in the gaps when you feel inadequate, and the grace that reminds you that no matter what, you are deeply loved. Let that grace be the foundation upon which you build your life, knowing that with every stumble you can always return to the embrace of a loving and forgiving God. God's grace is often misunderstood or even doubted in moments of deep failure or struggle. The enemy whispers lies, telling us that we've gone too far, messed up too badly, or that we've strayed so far from God that there's no chance of redemption. But Spirit is here to remind you of one unshakable truth: God's grace is infinite. It has no boundaries, no conditions, and no expiration date. No matter how far you've wandered, no matter how deep your mistakes run, His grace runs deeper still. Grace isn't just a safety net we rely on in our weakest moments. It's the very foundation that holds us steady, even in the storms. It doesn't wait for you to be perfect or for you to clean up your mess before stepping in. Instead, grace meets you right where you are in your pain, in your regret, in your brokenness. It's the steady hand that reaches into the chaos of life, pulling you back into the light, even when you feel unworthy or ashamed. Grace steps in and whispers, "You are still mine. Come back to me." Think about the times when you felt overwhelmed by the weight of your choices, burdened by guilt, only to experience a peace you couldn't have imagined possible. That's grace. Reflect on moments when God or others have extended forgiveness to you, even when you felt you didn't deserve it. That too is grace at work. It's not just passive forgiveness, it's a relentless force that pursues you, surrounds you, and refuses to let you go, no matter how many times you stumble. God's grace doesn't simply tolerate your imperfections, it transforms them. Imagine a sculptor chiseling away at a rough block of stone. With each careful stroke, the stone is shaped into a beautiful masterpiece. In much the same way, God's grace works in your life. It doesn't erase your past, nor does it dismiss the pain or mistakes you've made. Instead, grace redeems your past and uses the broken, painful, and messy parts of your life to create something new, something beautiful and meaningful. Grace doesn't just cover your flaws, it reshapes them into a testimony of God's goodness and love. This concept of grace is not a passive one. It's transformative. God's grace doesn't just sit back and wait for us to get it right, it works in the background, shaping our hearts, our minds, and our lives. Grace doesn't see our failures as permanent, it sees the possibility for redemption in every stumble. It's a constant, unwavering presence that encourages us to rise again, no matter how far we've fallen. Here's an exercise to help you reconnect with this powerful truth. Take a moment to reflect on a time when you felt undeserving of God's love or forgiveness, yet still experienced His grace in your life. Maybe it was a second chance in a relationship, an opportunity you thought was lost forever, or perhaps a quiet sense of peace in the midst of turmoil. Write it down. Let that moment serve as a reminder that God's grace didn't fail you then, and it won't fail you now. Sin may tell you that you're stuck, that your mistakes are too great to overcome. It will convince you that you've ruined everything, but grace whispers freedom into your spirit. It says, you are not your mistakes. You are not defined by your past. You are free and you are loved. Grace offers a different narrative, one of hope and restoration, where your flaws are not the end of your story, but the beginning of a new chapter where God's goodness shines brighter than ever before. In my own life, I've come to realize that grace is not just a one-time offering, it's an ongoing gift that is always available, even when we feel far from God. Grace doesn't just meet us in our darkest moments, it helps us grow and evolve. It transforms our struggles into opportunities for growth.
When I reflect on my own journey, I see how many times God's grace has shown up when I least expected it. And even when I felt unworthy, that same grace helped me rediscover hope, faith, and purpose. This is what grace does. It lifts us when we fall, heals us when we're broken, and reminds us that we are always loved, always forgiven, and never beyond the reach of His mercy.
So let this truth sink in. God's grace is always greater than any mistake, any regret, or any failure. It's the steady hand that reaches down and lifts you up, the love that never runs out, and the power that transforms your imperfections into something beautiful. Let this grace be the foundation of your life, and trust that no matter what you've done or how far you've strayed, God's love and grace will always be there, ready to redeem and restore. Grace isn't just about erasing the past, it's about empowering you for the future. It equips you with the strength, wisdom, and courage to move forward with a heart that is aligned with God's purpose. Every step you take in grace deepens your faith and brings you closer to the life He is calling you to live. It is a force that doesn't merely forgive but also transforms, shaping you into someone who lives with intention and purpose. To really internalize this truth, try this simple yet profound exercise. Find a quiet space, close your eyes, and speak these words aloud. God, I thank You for Your grace that never gives up on me. I surrender my flaws, my fears, and my failures into Your hands. Transform me, guide me, and help me walk in the freedom Your grace provides. Let these words sink deep into your spirit as a declaration of trust in God's unending love. Grace doesn't just free you from guilt, it changes the way you see yourself. It reminds you that your worth is not defined by your mistakes but by God's unbreakable love for you. Through grace you begin to see yourself as He sees you, redeemed, cherished, and full of untapped potential. You realize that your value doesn't come from what you've done, but from whose you are. This shift in perspective is nothing short of life-changing, setting you free from the chains of shame and self-doubt. God's grace is a gift you can't earn, and you can never repay. It isn't given to you because of what you've done or who you are, but because of who He is: merciful, loving, and faithful beyond measure. And the best part? Grace isn't a limited resource. It's infinite, overflowing, and available to you at every moment. It's the steady current that pulls you back toward Him, no matter how far you drift. Take this to heart. God's grace doesn't see you as broken beyond repair, it sees you as a masterpiece in progress. Each time you stumble, His grace is there to catch you, lift you up, and set you back on the right path. You are not your mistakes. You are His beloved child, covered in grace. Nothing can separate you from His love. So whenever you feel unworthy or burdened by guilt, remember this grace isn't about what you deserve, it's about what God desires for you. And He desires freedom, joy, and purpose for your life. Let His grace be your guide as you step boldly into the future He's calling you toward. This is the power of grace. It doesn't just cover your flaws, it transforms your life and restores your soul. Embrace it fully, for it is the key to living in the freedom and love of your Creator. Chapter 4. The consequences God wants to protect you from. Sin doesn't just create distance between you and God, it infiltrates every aspect of your life. It ripples outward, touching your relationships, your emotional stability, and even your physical well-being. When God grieves over sin, it's not out of anger or desire for punishment, it's because He knows the pain you're about to face. He desperately wants to shield you from it. Imagine a parent watching their child about to touch a flame, knowing the pain that will follow. That's how God feels when we choose sin. It's not about disappointment in you, it's heartbreak over the hurt you're about to experience. His commandments are not arbitrary rules, they're a roadmap, guiding you toward a life full of His blessings and free from unnecessary pain. Think back to a moment in your life when you made a choice that led you into pain or regret. Perhaps you ignored a warning, stepped into a relationship or situation that wasn't right, or made a decision that set you back. Now imagine how God felt in that moment. He wasn't angry at you, He was sorrowful for the consequences you would face, because He sees the bigger picture and He knows what's best for you. God doesn't want you to feel condemned. He wants you to understand that sin, while it may seem harmless or even pleasurable in the moment, brings with it consequences that are far more damaging than we realize. Every time we stray from His plan for us, we open the door to hurt, heartache, and unnecessary suffering. His heart is for your protection and well-being, and His grace is the way back to His loving embrace. Don't let sin steal your peace or derail your purpose. His commandments are a gift, a blueprint for living in harmony with His love, peace, and purpose. Trust that God's way is the path to a life that is filled with joy, fulfillment, and freedom from the pain that sin so often brings.
When a decision leads to a series of consequences that are hard to bear, it can be overwhelming. Maybe it was a choice that strained a relationship, caused deep regret, or created a cycle of anxiety and guilt. In those moments, imagine God witnessing your pain, feeling sorrow not because of condemnation, but because His love longs to see you thrive. He watches you endure hardship and wishes He could spare you from the consequences of your choices. His grief isn't rooted in disappointment, but in His deep desire for you to walk in alignment with the joy and peace He has planned for your life.
Take a moment to reflect, identify one area in your life where you still feel the weight of sin's consequences. Write it down, and then ask yourself, what's one action I can take today to begin the healing process? It might be seeking forgiveness from someone you've hurt, making amends, or simply praying for wisdom. Taking that first step, no matter how small, is an act of trust in God's ability to restore and redeem. God doesn't leave you alone to face the fallout from your actions. Instead, He walks beside you, offering guidance, strength, and nudging you toward healing. His presence is constant even in your darkest moments. When you are enduring the consequences of your choices, God doesn't just stand by, He actively works to turn your pain into an opportunity for growth and redemption. His heart is to bring you back to peace and fulfillment, not to condemn you. God's commandments are not about control but about freedom. He knows the traps sin sets for us, the bitterness that grows when we refuse to forgive, the isolation that comes when pride rules, or the emptiness from chasing fleeting pleasures. His guidance is meant to protect you, keeping you on a path that leads to true peace, purpose, and joy. Even when you stumble, God is already at work, turning your situation around for your good. That doesn't mean the consequences of sin will disappear overnight. Healing takes time. However, the important thing is that your story isn't over. God uses even the most painful experiences to shape you into someone stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected to Him. The consequences you face are not the end of the road, but part of the journey that leads you back to Him. A powerful action step you can take is to pray every night before you sleep. Pray a simple prayer of surrender, saying, God, I give you my mistakes, my regrets, and the consequences I'm facing. Help me to see your hand in this and guide me toward healing. This will remind you that no matter where you are in your journey, God's presence is with you, offering hope, direction, and peace. When you start seeing the consequences of your actions not as punishments, but as lessons, your perspective shifts completely. God doesn't allow pain to enter your life without using it for a higher purpose. Through these experiences, He teaches you the value of trust, the importance of obedience, and the beauty of living in alignment with His will. Take heart in this truth. Even when you're in the midst of difficult consequences, God's ultimate plan for your life has not been derailed. In fact, He's using this very moment to refine you, draw you closer to Him, and prepare you for the blessings ahead. The consequences you face are not a sign of His absence, but of His love, a love that will never give up on you. Chapter 5. The Joy of Returning to God. The moment you turn back to God, everything changes. The weight of guilt and shame begins to lift. The distance you once felt between you and Him starts to dissolve as His love rushes in to embrace you. There's a powerful shift in the atmosphere, both seen and unseen. The moment you make the decision to return to God, you step into a place of grace and restoration. It's a fresh start, a new beginning. It's hard to put into words the feeling that washes over you when you truly experience God's forgiveness. It's a joy that surpasses understanding. a peace that fills your heart in a way you never thought possible. Returning to God isn't just about forgiveness, it's about reconciliation, healing, and renewal. God doesn't just forgive, He restores, He redeems, and He celebrates your return. In those moments when you make the choice to turn back, remember that God's heart is always open, always waiting for you. His love never fails. It never gives up. It will always be there, welcoming you back with open arms.
Embrace the joy that comes with returning to God. Let it remind you that no matter how far you've strayed, His love has always been with you, waiting for the moment when you turn back toward Him. God's arms are always open, and His love is always ready to restore you completely.
What you may have feared would be a moment of judgment, full of condemnation and rejection, is instead a moment of overwhelming grace. God doesn't hold your past mistakes over you. Instead of pointing fingers or listing your faults, He celebrates your return with a joy that resonates throughout heaven. Scripture reminds us that heaven rejoices over one sinner who repents, and that one sinner can be you. Just imagine the profound joy of all creation aligning with this divine celebration. Consider the parable of the prodigal son. The son, burdened by guilt and overwhelmed by his failures, expected to face punishment and harsh judgment upon his return. But instead of punishment, he was met with something entirely unexpected: his father running toward him, arms outstretched, not to rebuke, but to embrace. This moment wasn't one of begrudging acceptance or reluctant forgiveness. No, it was an explosion of pure love, the kind of love that only a father could give to a son who had strayed far away. The father didn't wait for his son to explain or prove his repentance. There was no need for that. The father simply threw a feast, declaring to everyone around, "This is my son, and he was lost but now is found." This is exactly how God feels when you turn back to Him. He doesn't hold a tally of your wrongs, waiting to judge you. Instead, He is ready to pour out His love on you, declaring that you are His and that you've always been worth it. This is the heart of God's grace. It's not about how perfect you are or how many mistakes you've made, but about the direction of your heart. God is more concerned with your willingness to return to Him than with your imperfections. The moment you take one step toward Him, He has already taken 10 steps toward you. His grace is always there, waiting for you to turn around and step back into His arms. Take a moment to reflect on this truth. What would it be like if you allowed yourself to fully experience the depth of God's joy over you? What if you could picture His face radiating with love, His arms wide open, waiting for you to return? Imagine that joy and let it sink deep into your spirit. It's not about your perfection, it's about your heart, your desire to return to Him. Here's an exercise that can help you experience this more deeply. Find a quiet space, close your eyes, and visualize yourself walking toward God. Picture Him seeing you from afar, running toward you with an expression of joy and love on His face. Let this image fill you with peace, knowing that He is waiting for you, longing to welcome you home. Then, pray a simple prayer of gratitude. Thank you, God, for loving me even when I felt unworthy. Thank you for running toward me, for never abandoning me, and for always reminding me that I've never been alone. Returning to God isn't about achieving perfection. It's about surrender. It's about acknowledging that you need Him and trusting that His grace is enough to cover every mistake, heal every wound, and restore every broken part of your life. It's about knowing that God's love isn't something you earn, it's something He freely gives again and again, no matter how many times you stumble. This love is not conditional, it is constant, unwavering, and freely given to you. Think about this: how has God been waiting for you, not with frustration, but with anticipation? He's been preparing this very moment, orchestrating events, and placing signs along your path to draw you back into His loving embrace. Every whisper of conviction you felt, every gentle nudge in your spirit, has been Him saying, "Come home. I've been waiting for you." The joy of returning to God is not only about being restored to Him, but also about rediscovering your own worth in His eyes. The lies of guilt and shame might have convinced you that you were beyond redemption, that you were too far gone to be loved. But God sees you as His beloved child, precious and irreplaceable. When you return to Him, you're not only reconnecting with the Creator, but you're also reconnecting with the truth of who you are, a treasured child, deeply loved and valued. Here's another practice to help anchor you in this truth. Take a moment to reflect on how you've seen God's grace work in your life. Perhaps it was in a time of deep struggle, when you felt alone and lost. Or maybe it was in a quiet moment of peace, when you realized that despite your mistakes, God's love for you was unwavering. Write these moments down. Let them remind you of His patience, His kindness, and His endless grace toward you. As you meditate on these experiences, allow yourself to feel God's joy over your return, knowing that no matter how far you may have wandered, He has always been waiting for you to come back into His arms. In the end, God's grace isn't just about forgiving you for your past mistakes, it's about showing you that no matter how far you stray, His love will always bring you back, time and time again. Sin often whispers lies that reverberate deep within our hearts, convincing us that we've lost everything, our worth, our purpose, even our connection to God. It tries to make us believe that our mistakes have erased all the good we once had, leaving us feeling empty, abandoned, or broken. But the Spirit speaks a radically different truth. God's plan for your life doesn't disappear because of your mistakes. His ability to restore far exceeds anything sin could ever destroy. When you return to God, His response goes beyond mere forgiveness. It is a process of divine restoration that touches every aspect of your life. What you once thought was lost or shattered, whether it was a broken relationship, a dream that seemed abandoned, or a peace that felt unreachable, God is working to restore it. And here's the amazing part: He doesn't just return things to the way they were. No, He multiplies it, turning it into something more meaningful, more beautiful, and more aligned with His purpose for you. Think about a time in your life when you felt truly broken. Maybe a relationship seemed beyond repair, or perhaps you lost something you deeply cherished. Now imagine this God working in those very areas to bring healing, restoration, and renewal. His love is not passive. It's active, reshaping your life and replacing despair with hope. He's not interested in simply putting things back the way they were. His restoration is about stepping into something even greater than before, something that's been tailored for the version of you that's emerged through this journey. Here's an exercise to help you connect with the restoration God is bringing into your life. Take a piece of paper and write down 3 areas where you feel a loss. It might be a relationship that's been strained, an opportunity that slipped away, or a joy that's been absent for too long. Next to each one, write a prayer of gratitude. Thank God in advance for the restoration that is already unfolding. Visualize those areas of loss being filled with divine light, renewed and transformed by His power. God's restoration isn't just about the tangible things in your life. It's also about healing your heart and renewing your spirit. The weight of guilt, shame, or regret that you've carried doesn't define you. It doesn't limit God's ability to work in your life. Every tear you've cried, every prayer you've whispered, has been seen, heard, and honored by God. He's been preparing a way forward for you, filled with abundance, peace, and purpose. Restoration often begins subtly. You might notice a new opportunity that seems to come out of nowhere, or feel a sudden sense of peace in an area that's been troubling you for years. These are not mere coincidences. They are the first fruits of God's work in your life. He's not just putting the pieces back together, He's creating something entirely new. This new creation is perfectly suited for the person you've become through your journey of growth and healing. Here's an action step to help you engage with God's restoration in your life. Choose one area where you felt the most loss and take a step toward healing. If it's a strained relationship, consider reaching out with love and forgiveness. If it's a dream you thought was lost, take a small step toward rekindling it. Know that as you take these steps, God is already working behind the scenes to restore what was lost and make it even more beautiful than you could ever imagine. God's restoration isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about making you whole again, about restoring your heart, your mind, and your spirit to the fullness of His love and purpose.
When we experience loss, whether it's a lost dream, peace, or opportunity, it's easy to think that what's gone is lost forever. The enemy wants us to believe that what has been taken can never be restored. However, the Spirit reminds us that nothing is beyond redemption. Even the things that feel like they're lost, broken, or abandoned are being transformed into something greater. What was once a source of pain or regret is now being reshaped into blessings that align with who we are, becoming a person more deeply connected with the Spirit, wiser and more grounded in purpose.
Restoration doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. And though it may feel slow at times, each small step you take signals your faith in God's ability to heal and restore. Whether it's reigniting a passion for a dream or spending time in prayer to renew your peace, every action is a sign that you trust God's hand in your life. These small steps are not insignificant, they are an act of hope. They signal that you believe, with God, nothing is beyond redemption. God is transforming your losses into stepping stones for a future greater than what you could have imagined. The areas that have been most painful, whether it's a relationship that seemed irreparable, a dream that felt abandoned, or a loss of peace, are being used by God to shape you into the person He's calling you to be. Each lesson you've learned, each ounce of resilience you've developed, and each moment you've spent reconnecting with Him is part of the transformation process. God's restoration isn't about merely returning things to their former state, it's about preparing you for what's next. As you continue on this journey, new opportunities, relationships, and a deeper sense of peace will begin to unfold, opportunities that align with the person you are becoming. Spirit is urging you to hold on to hope, knowing that what's ahead will surpass anything you've left behind. Trust in God's timing and lean into His love. Restoration may be gradual, but it is real, and it is already happening.
As you step into this new season, know that the things you thought were lost will be returned to you multiplied, perfected, and transformed by God's hands. Trust that the things that felt like ruins in your life are now God's canvas, and He is painting a masterpiece with your story.
The journey of restoration is not just about healing past wounds, but about stepping into a new season of growth, purpose, and divine alignment. Even in the moments of pain, God is using it to shape a future more beautiful and abundant than you could ever imagine. Now, let's talk about how God sees you today. It's so easy for us, as humans, to look at ourselves through the lens of failure, regret, and unworthiness. After we've sinned or made mistakes, it's natural to feel like we are defined by our shortcomings. We carry the weight of shame, believing that our failures are what shape us. But Spirit is here to make this truth crystal clear. God doesn't see you as broken. He doesn't define you by your mistakes or keep a record of your failures. Instead, He sees you through the lens of infinite love and grace. You are His beloved child, unique, crafted with divine purpose, and filled with immeasurable potential. Your mistakes do not define you. God doesn't dwell on your past, He celebrates your future. The moment you turn to Him seeking forgiveness and alignment with His will, He rejoices. He sees not only your growth, but the strength you've gained and the steps you've taken to draw closer to His plan for you. Take a moment to absorb this truth. If God, in all His wisdom and perfection, doesn't see you as broken, why should you? His love for you is unwavering. He sees you as His masterpiece, and His love for you has never wavered, not for a second. He rejoices in who you are becoming, and His delight in you is not based on your perfection, but on His unwavering love for you. This perspective shifts everything. It frees you from the weight of shame and regret, enabling you to step into your future with confidence and joy. You are not defined by your mistakes or your past. You are defined by God's boundless love for you. This love is not conditional, it is eternal and unshakable. And no matter where you've been or what you've done, His arms are open, welcoming you back with joy. You are His, always and forever. Why should you carry the weight of guilt, especially when God has already forgiven you completely? Spirit is gently asking you to release the burdens of shame and self-condemnation that have held you captive for so long. Why continue to hold on to regret and the chains of self-doubt when God's grace and love are abundantly available for you right now? You don't have to remain stuck in the past, haunted by mistakes or missteps. God's forgiveness is a powerful, transformative force that clears away the old, bringing you into a new life. So why hold on to guilt when God has let it go for you?
Here's a reflective exercise to help you internalize this truth. Stand in front of a mirror and look deeply into your own eyes. Take a deep breath and speak these words aloud. I am loved. I am forgiven. I am forgiven. I am whole. God sees me as worthy and complete. Let these words sink deep into your spirit. Repeat them every day until they become the truth you live by. These words will anchor you in the reality of God's unwavering love for you, a love that sees past your faults and sees your potential. Let these affirmations serve as a reminder of God's eternal perspective, one of grace, compassion, and endless possibility.
God does not see you as broken or unworthy. He sees you as a beacon of His light, a person who carries His love and truth into a world that desperately needs it. The challenges and struggles you faced are not meaningless. They have served to refine you, to strengthen you, and to prepare you for what lies ahead. What you once saw as brokenness or failure was actually the Spirit's way of shaping you, teaching you, and growing you into the person you are becoming. This isn't about erasing your past, it's about transforming it. Every part of your story, yes, even the parts you wish you could rewrite, has been part of God's divine purpose to draw you closer to Him and inspire others along the way. Forgiveness from God is not just a clean slate, it's a profound transformation that empowers you to walk boldly in your purpose. His forgiveness gives you the power to move forward with confidence, knowing that you are restored, not just to where you were, but to a higher place of purpose, growth, and freedom. Take a moment to reflect on the journey that has brought you here. It's time to fully embrace the truth that God has already redeemed you, and He is calling you to walk confidently in His love. To deepen this understanding, I encourage you to take a journal and write a letter to God. Thank Him for the way He sees you, for the grace and forgiveness He offers, and for the love that continues to guide you. Pour out your gratitude and ask for His continued guidance to see yourself the way He sees you. Then, write a letter back to yourself from God's perspective. Imagine His words of love, affirmation, and encouragement, words that will lift you up and remind you of your worth and divine potential. Let this dialogue strengthen your relationship with God and deepen your understanding of how He sees you. God doesn't just see your potential, He sees you already walking in it. He sees the healed version of you, the one who is thriving, inspiring others, and living in alignment with His plan. This vision of you is not a distant hope or a far-off dream. It is already within you, waiting to be fully realized. The moment you step into the reality of God's love, you unlock the full potential of who He has called you to be. God is not focused on your past mistakes, He is focused on the beautiful future He has prepared for you. Your journey, your struggles, your growth, your triumphs has brought you to this moment of profound understanding and transformation. God has never left your side, not even in your darkest moments. Even when you felt alone or unworthy, He was there, guiding you, cheering you on, and waiting patiently for you to see yourself through His loving eyes. You are not defined by your past, your failures, or your mistakes. You are defined by God's love and His eternal purpose for you. The path ahead is incredibly bright. Spirit is reminding you that your true identity is rooted in God's truth, not in the opinions of others or the weight of your past. Your identity is not tied to your mistakes or the opinions of others, it is rooted in God's unconditional love for you. Walk forward with confidence, knowing that you are deeply loved, eternally forgiven, and divinely purposed. God's vision for your life is greater than anything you could ever imagine, and He is ready to lead you into the fullness of that promise. Trust the process, trust His timing, and trust that the best is yet to come. Take this moment to reflect on what you have learned from your journey. Allow it to sink deep into your soul. You are loved unconditionally by God. His arms are always open to embrace you, and His guidance is ever present. You are never alone. He is ready to lead you into the life He has planned for you, one full of love, purpose, and divine grace. If this message resonates with you, Take a moment to like this post, subscribe to Cosmic Harmony, and leave a comment with the number 77 to send a signal to the universe. Play this video on repeat, allowing the energy of spirit to wash over you and fill your heart with peace and hope. Let go of guilt, let go of regret, and embrace the abundant life that is already yours. The best is truly yet to come. Keep trusting the process, lean into God's grace, and shine your light in the world.